Also had that you're unmuted. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I found that confusing. So I added the vegan curry with like. No.
All right, hello everyone. Hello. Welcome to On the Menu, everyone. Can I have everyone's attention, please? Y'all, happy Wednesday. Thank you all for joining us today, whether you're online or in person. We are excited that you are here. Today officially starts our entire prep for our upcoming career fair. So if you are looking for a job in our GP area, make sure you keep your eyes out for that information. We have some upcoming, like on the menus, prep work, including some things going on during our out of offices, which is our Thursday happy hours, which includes headshots, some elevator pitch prep and LinkedIn reviews. So keep your eye on that. It's all on our website for your information and it's on Eventbrite. So feel free to sign up if you're ready to look for a job. But today we are going to be doing resume prep with Linda and I will hand it over to her.
Ta-da! Hi, so if you want to be smarter and better looking by the end of this sentence, pay attention. So my name is Linda Gutin, and I see you don't need a pen because it's G-U-T-I-N. So I was going to memorize this last night, and then on my way home, I accidentally, not on purpose, drove into a ditch, and everything's fine. It only cost $170 to find that out, but so I wrote myself some cue cards, and I will be looking at them because I would rather you get really good information about how to maximize the success of your job search, starting with your resume. So we have until about 15 minutes to 1, at which point we'll do Q&A. So if you do have any questions, unless it's to, can you please speak louder? I would appreciate you just writing them down and then asking them towards the end. Okay, so full disclosure, the only way you can guarantee that you're going to have the best resume in a pile is to make it the only resume in that pile. And I'll talk about how you do that by asking somebody nicely to actually read it. But since that's not always possible, just feel safe that if you follow the Gutin way to resume, you will have one of the best in every pile. Why, with all the resume experts out there, some of you who will have told you exactly the opposite of what I'm going to tell you, why should you listen to me? Because I said so. For the time being, for this session, I'm right about everything that I say. And if you want to mess up your resume afterwards, there's nothing I can do about it. So instead of doing one-on-one resumes, which I've done most of my life, I'm looking at, during the pandemic, I went to so many different webinars. I was like, look, this is finally my dream. It's the Linda Mary Gutin show. So I'm a failed comedian, and that's okay. I know I'm still funny. So these lessons that I'm going to teach you are really universal. They're not just good for your current resume. You should be thinking about this for future resumes, for when you're doing that self-assessment part of your annual or biannual performance appraisal. If you're looking to make internal moves, and certainly the 10 years from now. And, oh, I forgot to bring, I was going to bring all this fake money to wave in front of you, because a lot of what I'm saying is going to be worth hundreds of dollars each time you use it. And I'll prove that to you momentarily. So as soon as I get to page number 3. Sorry, I don't have somebody holding the cue cards. That's the problem. Okay. Right about now, you may be wondering, why resumes, Linda? Well, I'm gonna go into most of it on social media, but the 2 main reasons is, one of my friends pointed out, it's no surprise you became a writer, editor. Don't you remember in junior high, when we would pass you notes, you would pass them back with the spelling corrected? And I didn't remember, but I did a lot of partying in high school and college, but I could not deny it. Now, the other one is, most people know that their resumes are not as good as they could be. And one day when I was sitting doing somebody's resume, I thought, I wonder what happens to their confidence when they're sitting across from an interviewer and the interviewer looks down at the resume to grab some information to ask a question. I felt like that might affect their confidence a little, knowing that it's not as good as it could be. And then I remembered a character from the show In Living Color, Tommy Davidson played, where when he handed people his business card, he'd go, bam. I don't want you to say that, but I want you to feel that when somebody is reading your resume, because having gone through this process, you're going to know, hey, check me out. That's all my best stuff. Ask me anything you want, because it's all there for a reason. And by the way, when I talk about your resume, I'm primarily talking about your master resume. You create a master resume. I like to think of it as your master closet, where you have that there ready to go. And then you create one interview outfit for target one. And then the second job may be similar, and you're gonna just make a slight change. So that's like going into the closet and changing your jacket for a sweater, or, you know, one tie for another one. And then you may have to have a substantially different one for another target. Guess what? You can go into that closet. All of the components are there, and you can put together another outfit for that. Not really an interview yet, but, and by the way, when people say they don't read cover letters, they do. If they like your resume and you go into the pile to reread them, if you're, you have a cover letter that doesn't frighten them, and we're not going into that right now, but let's just say that big blocks of text keep people from reading things. So that's why I'm going to say no paragraphs. That's a writer downer. Well, I can't believe I said that. I don't like it when other people do. Okay, no paragraphs. I'm a big on Times New Roman. Anything over 2 lines is a paragraph. If you need to go longer, then use sub bullets. And when you're drafting it, you don't worry about how it's going to be written. Most people, when they're writing their resume, they're deciding what's going to be on it at the same time as they're writing it and they're formatting it. But when I realized that those were 3 different processes and separated it out, it made things come together better. I don't fix people's resumes. I don't think you should fix your resume. I think you should start with the blank page. Somebody once said, oh, I get it. You're going to knock my resume down to the studs. And I said, actually, I'm going to help you pick out a nice new plot of land, design the home you want to live in, determine what it's going to take home built, and then first go shopping in your current home, because certain things are definitely making the trip. So, you know, you're going to have your name, your contact information, then the different headings, summary, career highlights, experience, education, and a few others. And that's the typical. So I'm going right down the middle with that. And everybody here knows that when you show your resume to people, they're very likely to tell you what you did wrong. Most of them don't know what they're talking about. They mean well. So be very careful who you ask for input. And when you do, say, hopefully you'll get to this point where you can say, I don't need your help with the formatting or the writing style. Please don't tell me that there are no periods at the end of bullets, because that's a stylistic choice that I was taught to do 26 years ago, and I prefer that. So just as long as you're consistent, like I said, you want to do it differently. Nobody's had trouble hearing me, right? Because now that I'm speaking into the microphone, I sound louder to myself. Okay, so there's content, what's going to be on it, and then there's writing and there's formatting. So I like to concentrate on your content first, and that's your value proposition. and everybody has a value proposition that exceeds who they are as a worker, correct? Somebody may have been a manager of volunteers for the church bazaar, and there were 50 volunteers, and they raised twice as much money as ever before. I'm not saying that you're going to include that, but you can include management skills or volunteer management skills. You don't have to have gotten paid for the item to take credit for it. Overall, my goal is that people will take credit where credit is not only due, but where it's overdue. And when you start to draft it, when you start putting down the content, do not worry about how it's going to be written or formatted. That's what'll make you freeze up and wonder how you're going to create a good bullet out of it. And here's why, because once you have your value proposition spread out, and you're going to start putting things into your master resume, your master closet, you do not want to try and fix things. You do not want to edit it. You can put it down, and if a perfect bullet rolls out off your brain, go ahead and put it down. Don't say, Linda said I can't write it. You can't edit it. Don't edit it. And here you may see 5 things that are all similar, and you can knock them out with one career highlight. You're going to see things that you do not like to do, and you're going to put them to the side. You're only going to do them if it's worth it, right? Sometimes you have a skill that you have to use, even if you don't love it. Job and career satisfaction, they're not the same. They're similar. They share characteristics, but you can have a job that you like and you're getting paid okay, and the deal that you have isn't making you nauseous. That would be job satisfaction. Sometimes you have a job you don't like, but after you're done, you feel some satisfaction. That'll be your career satisfaction. Some people are lucky enough to find a role where they feel both at the same time. But I had, as an example, a friend of mine who was a single mother had to be 10 minutes from her daughter's schools, had to have good benefits, and she had to be able to work from home occasionally. And then several years later, I was doing a GoFundMe, and she sent me $50. And I called her and I said, since when have you, I've known you since 4th grade, since when have you had an extra $50? And she said, well, one of my friends / bookkeeping clients decided she wanted to hire me full time to be her husband and hers combination personal and executive assistant. And they like me to be as smart as I can be. I'm not, baby in a corner. I don't know if you know what that's from. So when you're trying to consider, like, what is this job search about? This particular search, that's what's going to be in your master resume. There'll be things that you'll move aside and maybe you'll put into storage that you then, because you don't want to do it again. But then you'll see a job posting that says 5% that. Well, you've been through this process, you go back to storage, you put it on the, I call it your reservoir, you figure out where best that can now go in the resume to tick that box for the reviewer. What's interesting is there's really no way to determine how an individual is going to read your resume. We write it from the top down. Actually, we draft it without the summary or the career highlights because those are the most important and they're more obvious after you've done experience and education and all of that. Your highlights will sort of jump off the page at you. And sometimes a highlight can be several things. History of, right? Or I'm not going to get into the weeds on this. By the way, I just launched my website, and what you're going to get when you go there and put in your email, you will get a sample of a comparison between a cloud engineer's resume when he came to me and then after he left. and he did get a great job. So what I'd like you to do right now, quickly under anywhere on that page, is write down 3 tasks that you love to do, because the characteristics shared in job and career satisfaction are the tasks that you do. So 3 that you love, and it could be like, but love. And then 3 that you hate doing. And then I want you to put down 3 things or 1 thing, whatever, that you're really good at. I want you to brag your hiney off on paper. When you finally put it on the resume, it won't sound like bragging, but unless you get it out and onto that reservoir, you won't remember it. So if you have a career highlight that was more than 15 years in your history, and people are telling you, don't include that on your resume, you might still have a highlight from that time period that you can include, and it doesn't have to track to a job. For the master resume, you do want to go back all the way. One of my clients is sitting here, and when I was doing her resume, I discovered some things that she did what was her first job? She was, the night before she turned 15, she walked into the local American Outfitters, I think, and said, I'm eligible to work here starting tomorrow, and walked out with the job and outsold other people. That may not stay on her resume, but it sure goes on her LinkedIn. So if you've got a past that has some things of value to include in your search, then put it in your, because I come from the land of resumes before LinkedIn existed, I want to know, I want you to remember your achievements from back then. And if you have a significant other or a parent or a friend who's known you for a while, they might remember better than you do. Oh, don't you remember you came home that day and you were like, da, 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 da. You didn't put that on your resume. Or don't you remember that in our community involvement, you fix computers, right? That place in the triangle that you can drop them off. So did everybody write down 3 tasks you love, 3 that you hate, and what are you really good at? What you want to do, especially if you have your resumes here, but if not at home, you want to see whether the stuff you love to do is emphasized, if it can be for this job search, and the things that you hate to do are de-emphasized. Again, if it's valuable, you're going to still take credit for it, but maybe not emphasize it because you don't want them thinking that you're going to do it again or that you want to do it again. So now you're going to put all this information to the side so I can continue with metaphor mania. So I talked about the knocking your resume down to the studs. That's one. The other is spreading your value proposition on the table so that you can then overlay it with the answers to the questionnaire, which my questionnaire is 12 questions. I just gave you the 3 top ones, right? What do you love to do, hate to do, and what are you really good at? Those are things that you need to consider when looking at your current resume. And then the third metaphor is my favorite. I call it bringing the cha-ching. Everybody heard of that you're supposed to quantify and qualify stuff on the resume? Well, not everybody knows all the things that that can include, because it's not just about showing people the difference that you made. That's terrific. But not everybody sees those numbers, right? They're not privy to what the operating budget was or what the annual revenue is. But you can Google that and find that out, and dollar signs, percentage signs, and numbers need to go everywhere they possibly can, because that's what catches the attention of the skimmers. So I'm doing a resume for a guy who's got great cha-ching, except for he's not taking credit for the fact that he's working for a $12 billion a year bank or something like that. For banks, it's called, assets under management or whatever. But again, this is when you're just jotting things down. So it's like going into your memory bank with some definitions that I'm about to give you and coming out and putting those gems on this table, again, without trying to write them, without editing them. You can write them, but don't edit them. Okay, so then once you see all of the gems laid out, when I'm working with somebody, and you might want to find somebody who can do this for you, I start asking questions. How many people were on that team? What was the size of the budget that you managed? I was doing one for an executive assistant, and I knew she, in her opening line, was going to talk about the fact that she supported 5 senior vice presidents in a huge company. So I said, well, she said she liked to manage events. I said, what's the largest budget you were entrusted with? And she said $10,000. And I said, that's not going to do it. Go ask your former boss for some stats. And she comes back, and the line, instead of supporting 5 senior vice presidents, was supporting 5 senior vice presidents in marketing department with $400 million a year budget. Cha-ching, and that's the opening line. I believe I mentioned earlier, no paragraphs. And when you go and get that free summary comparison, you'll see that the opening for the summary goes no longer than 2 lines. And whenever possible, should include some cha-ching. But more important than the cha-ching in the opening line is that it references the job you're submitting for. So if it's a project management job and you happen to be a project management professional or an experienced project manager, that's code for I don't have my PMP yet, you're going to put that opening. So the formula for your opening is basically job title you're applying for or the field that you're in, plus the best thing about your background related to this job. And sometimes when you're sending your resume in, it's not for a job, it's for an information interview. And so that's why you want to be a little vague, because that person might know about several possibilities within that company or outside the company that they think that you would be good at. And if you just say project management professional and it's program management, and you don't have that anywhere, you've done yourself a disservice. Of course, you have to be good at that to write it in there. Because those are the 3 metaphors. I talked about switching your wardrobe up. And you do, when you have somebody really trusted advisor, and you say, I don't want you to forward this to anybody, but I am going to share my master resume with you. And just know that I will never submit it this long. But you want them to see everything. Now, I started to say you can never tell how somebody's going to read a resume. I showed it to a recruiter, a sample resume, and I saw that his eyes went straight to the experience. And I said, what about that beautiful summary and career highlights? And he said, you read resumes your way, and I'll read resumes my way, which I read them from the bottom up. And that's not to judge where you went to school, but to sort of have an understanding of if it goes all the way back or if you're younger, what did you study? What's your career trajectory been like? And then I read it from the top down, right? So magazines know that people are going to read it from the back or the middle, but they put the table of contents towards the beginning. So that's why we still have to do a summary and a really killer summary and career highlights. The next thing is, because you don't know where somebody is going to start, is that the first line, because even if you read it from the bottom up, you don't read each job from the bottom up. You go to that job, company name, job title, and then responsibilities. And don't use the word responsibilities. That's way old school and not good old school. And because I'm good old school. So I know I'm yammering. You will get a chance to ask questions, but what time are we at? Okay, great. So the quantifying and qualifying on steroids is to not only get out the difference that you made, but to keep people's eyes on the page. And thirdly, it sets the context for the reader, right? So if a janitor works for a $12 billion a year medical devices company, it's going in the first line. It's not a lie. It sets the context for the reader, and it keeps people's eyes on the page. It either draws them in. So your opening line in the summary needs to be great. Your first career highlight, well, all your career highlights should be great because they're your highlights, right? But you definitely want the first one. Then under each job, you want that opening line to be the best one. Add some cha-ching. You have been entrusted with something. One client who's super successful, and I couldn't believe she hired me, and it worked, but twice. She said, well, I've only managed a budget myself that was 5 million, but there were 4 of us that worked on it, a $20 million budget. So I managed to get both of those in the opening line. And basically what you're saying to the reader is sit up and pay attention. This person is worth reading about, because you may know this, but when a recruiter is looking at your resume, they may that 6 to 10 second thing saying that that's why you need to grab their attention with lines and bold. I'm against that. I think that if you just leave really well-written phrases for them, they'll find that for the 6 to 10 seconds. And then they'll probably read the company name, the job title, maybe a highlight, but they'll look at that first line. They can't really help it because it's right under the job title, right? So you want to make sure that they read that, and hopefully will come back and read the whole thing. So recruiters, and I just went through this where a client showed a friend who's in HR the resume, and the woman was like, well, you already said this in the career highlights. Why are you saying it again here? And I said, I'll bet you she read every word. She's a friend of yours, right? She read every word. And she said, yeah, she did read every word. I said, not everybody's going to do that. Most people aren't. And if they start in the career highlights, we grab them there. We don't write it the same way under the job as we do in the career highlights. Under the job, it's like, what were the details that are necessary to share? And still the cha-ching. And then in the career highlight, you might have history of increasing sales by up to 30% a year or $10 million. And now that's one company could have been the 30% and the other company could have been the $10 million. You're just combining it into one highlight, right? That's why you don't want to start writing things until you're ready. So when you start to draft, do the experience first. Then if you want to, as you're going along, you can cut and paste what you know is going to be a highlight into the highlights section. Just don't edit it yet. Again, because you might combine a few things, or maybe there's something that you're really not giving enough credit to, and you start to look at it and you're like, wow, there's a little story behind this that applies to this job. I'm going to maybe have a bullet and some sub bullets. And it will be, again, it will be written different under your, the job versus career highlights. And I am going to go into a few things that are even more boring than what we've covered so far. But it changed who I was from somebody who could make sure there were no typos and that it was cleanly formatted. But if you didn't give me the information, I did not know what to ask for. And then I got a master's in organizational psychology, which is the study of how to maximize an organization's effectiveness through its human systems. So these next 2 sets of 3 things are key. And I give the definitions to the clients, giving them to you to go into your memory bank and bring out the gems. And so there are 3 kinds of behavior in every organization. Formal behavior is what you're told to do. It's what's on your job description. And it's usually already on your resume, but maybe you didn't take credit for all of the results from it. Then there's informal behavior, which I usually say can't really find a place for on a resume, but maybe on LinkedIn. And then the most important one is non-formal behavior. What did you do that came from your brain? Now, don't write down, this is my formal behavior and this is my non-formal behaviors, because often they're combined, right? You're told to go solve that problem and then you solve it in a way that's never been done before and it gets rolled out to the rest of the company. That's sort of formal because you were told to, and non-formal together, because that's the idea for how to do it came from your brain. But there are plenty of things that people do that are not in their job description, and that you want to show readers that you're looking around and looking for ways to make things better, right? And you can only, this is the next set of 3 things. You can, when somebody is reading your resume, basically what they want to know is, can this person increase the value of the organization? And you can do that 3 ways. You can increase revenue or help the person is increasing revenue, decrease costs, which is if you increase productivity, you do something faster, better, that's really reducing costs. And then the last one is creating goodwill. And yes, if you are the person who put together the charity team that raised $10,000, you want to put that in there, but, or put it on the reservoir. You may not have room for it on the resume, but you'll want to put it on LinkedIn. So one example of non-formal behavior, now let me get to the goodwill again. It can be doing a better job for the, has anybody ever said to you, you made my job so much easier. You did such a good thing with that. So, and by the way, now that you know these things, those are the things that you're going to write down, right? So the heretofore unnamed client who's in here got a job and started to keep track so that updating her resume, she could do most of it. And I'm sure she used that in conversations to try and get another, it was a contract, to try and get another contract. But I mean, she called me once and she said, I think I saved the company between $5 and $18 million. And like she had just started. And I was like, well, write that down. But, figure out whether it was 5 or 18. So now is part of the magic. Okay, you're going to look at the formal behavior that you've thrown down, and you're going to think, where didn't I take credit for increasing revenue or helping the people who increase revenue, decreasing costs or contributing to it, or creating goodwill? So one of my, the second one, a client who was a secretary said, oh, I've never done any non-formal behavior. So I said, really, did you ever rearrange the filing system and people told you how much easier it was to find things? Oh yeah, I do that sort of stuff all the time. Well, write them down, because guess what? That's increasing productivity, which is decreasing costs. You're going to use, when you're putting things down, whether something looks better as a dollar sign or a percentage sign is something you're going to want to consider, right? So somebody had increased a $50,000 product line by $50,000. She was applying at big companies, and I was like, that's not good enough. But 100% improvement is good enough. And then conversely, I'm looking at another person's resume, and it says that he increased his product line 5%. And I'm like, well, wait a second, this is IBM. What does 5% equate to? And he says $20 million. So I'm like, we're going to use $20 million because that cha-ching will catch the eyes better than 5%. And then one client had like just started a department and he increased sales by 3,000%. And I'm like, that's gonna just make people think you're obnoxious. Because, you know, if I fill this room up and then tomorrow I fill up that room, then that might be 100% day over day improvement versus 50 more people, right? Okay, so drafting. Normally when I draft somebody's resume at this point, even though I told you to start with a blank slate, I start with the current, most recent resume. I add anything, or I have them add previous resume materials that you may have left off. Because again, the master, which we will use for the targeted resume, for LinkedIn, for cover letters, for conversations. Getting your resume done, one client said the resume was terrific, but it was the conversations we had on the way to getting it done, that made the difference, because it changed what I said in my elevator pitch, at social events. Hey, what's new? I'm looking for a new job. I'm working on my resume. He was excited about it. And then, of course, it changed what he said in the interview room. Because if they started to talk about something in his past that he didn't want to do again, he made sure to sort of guide them back to the job description or the job posting. So I take the current compilation of resumes and I expand it. I use page line spacing and paragraph spacing just to leave more room to go in and write down what the increased revenue, you want to look at what formal behavior, increased revenue, decreased costs, and created goodwill, and what non-formal behavior, increased revenue, decreased costs, and created goodwill. And while every inquiry will not result in a good number or any number, just try to get the most you can. So the size of the company, setting the context. And by the way, that janitor could be working at a 2,000 student suburban high school. Again, not a lie, it's got a number to catch the attention of the reader, and it sets the context. So I call that your expanded before resume, because it's before I start to rewrite it. I mentioned start writing with the experience, then education, community involvement. Those are much easier to get down, mostly finished. You don't have to be 100% finished, because let's face it, you're never 100% finished with your resume. You want to, any highlights that come to you, you'll put them in the place, but I know I'm repeating myself, but that's okay. Now, you'll see on the sample that you can get from my website that this guy was a technologist, so there was two tables. One was a table that might have management and information technology, but then one table was databases, hardware, software, sometimes certifications if it's really key and you don't want to wait for somebody to get to the second page. And that, by the way, you can look at your resume and see where the dollar signs are. People who have great dollar signs sometimes don't let you know about it until the second page or the middle of the first page, and the reader may never get there. So that's why you want to have cha-ching in the opening line if you can, in the opening line of your career highlights, and under every job. So in the summary, you'll see that these tables are there. And I know that to make something ATS compliant, you have to not have tables. Recently, I heard a recruiter say it's okay to use columns, but I use tables for the drafting. And then when it's ready to be, after it was customized, I convert it. I use Word. You can't do this in Google Docs. I convert it from table to text, and it lines up and looks exactly the same, and that's okay. I prefer that over, sometimes people will have, you know, skill set asterisk, skill set asterisk, and it'll be centered. Well, that's a big clump of text that nobody wants to read. Having it lined up in the table is better. And so whenever you're editing it, you're really going to want the structure of the table cells, because if you take something out, it doesn't all of a sudden change where everything else is. And that's, and then you blame me, and I don't want you doing that. So at least not to my face. Okay, so what you want on the resume is combining really what you want to do with what you're really good at. And even though I said that most of the time I have those headings, off every once in a while, somebody comes along and they have a different need. I had a guy with 25 years experience who said the CEO of a company he wanted to work for was going to read his resume, but he only reads one page. So I broke some of my own rules. I tried not to have very many paragraphs. I had to have sub-bullets, but I didn't stick to that because I needed to fit it on one page. Then he contacted me and said, okay, I'm ready for that second page now. Got the job, didn't like it after a year. He said, hey, all the recruiters want a more standard resume, because for the second version, I only kept the first page the way it was and added all of his awards and stuff that we had to leave off. Okay. When you start looking for feedback, as I mentioned, you really don't want to go to more than 1 or 2 people. To have the best resume in the pile, you're probably going to need to hire the best resume writer you can afford. Be careful. Do not go for the low-cost provider. If you can't afford to pay $500 for something that's going to help you earn money, then find the person you know in your life who's done the best in the corporate world. Ergo, they've read a lot of resumes. And again, say, I'm comfortable with how this is written and formatted. I really want your answers to the content based on the conversation we had. What content is missing? What content is extraneous? And what needs clarification? And when I came up with those questions, I was like, that's brilliant, because they can't give you those answers without actually reading your resume. So even if they said they would the first time you asked them, they probably still skimmed it. And now they have to go back and they have to actually read it. And this is just about planting seeds in people's heads about what you're capable of doing. And they may not think of who they can refer you to for a month or a year, but it's good practice anyway. Developing the resume is really great for knowing what you want and what you don't want. So the way that were we at question time? Okay. So to get people to actually read your resume, you pick them carefully and you ask them nicely. And you say something along the lines of, I'm sending you the resume that I wrote for humans to read. Please do not put this into the applicant tracking system. I invite you to print it out and read it, because reading a resume that you're holding in your hands or is printed out on the desk is a very much more profound experience than reading it on the screen. So you want to, and it's a command. I invite you to download and print. I was reading a book on copywriting, and they talked about how you can't say, for most things, you can't say, buy here now, but you can say, if you want to feel better every morning when you wake up, comma, buy here now, or click here now. So you bury the command, which now all cover letters I write at the very end. So try to make it your own. After you have finished reading the resume and LinkedIn, I hope you will contact me and put your contact information right there so that I don't have to go look for it, right? I'm not saying that this always works, but it's better than just saying, thank you for this opportunity. I really feel like I'm the best candidate. Well, you don't know who the other candidates are, so how can you know that? And how can you know if you're perfect? And I'm against headlines that say information technology or IT project manager. Because what if they're looking for other people? You've now sort of, you've said, I want that, as opposed to having an opening line that talks about the best thing related to that role that you're applying for, or if there's no role related to that company, related to that industry, why you enjoy working in the energy sector, like one of my clients recently. That was cool. He was working in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I will be holding workshops every month. Some of them will be free webinars and others will be hopefully priced to sell. But follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Those links are on my website, gutinway2resume.com. And the 2 can either be spelled out or the number 2. I think it's going to work that way too. Okay. Ta-da. Are there any questions? First, we'll go to the Zoom people. Did anybody ask any questions? Okay. Okay. All right, somebody ask a question. Okay.
When is it advisable, or when is it okay to do a functional resume, if ever? Because you have all these skill sets and you feel like it'll be easier for the reader to see, okay, strategic development, technical skills, whatever, rather than a chronological, but they still want to know where you worked and what
Right.
dates are. How do you marry?
So when I first worked for, so when I went to go try and do comedy and I moved to LA inadvisably, I would start in the paper where there were, some of you are here old enough to remember newspapers with classifieds, and I would start in the W's. And I found one for a resume writer and I walked in and I got the job. And last time this ever happened, although I gave myself a job. So the form that I was taught was a hybrid. The summary would have the objective, back when there were objectives, and then lines that I'm sure you've seen and may even have on your resume, proven ability to. At a certain point, when I started seeing people write select achievements or career highlights, I decided that instead of saying they have a proven ability to, I'm going to give them an example that proves it. So basically, in the summary, what you put in the table is your expertise. You're basically saying, this is what I am claiming. And you don't always have to use the word expertise. Some people are more comfortable with strengths. You will see that I put that at the end of the opening line in the summary to save a couple of lines, because everything is about saving lines. So that is kind of you have the skill set, you have examples of the proven whatever, and that top part is considered functional part of the hybrid, and the rest is chronological.
How many highlights do you recommend for a job title?
So for the master, the max I usually like is 8 or 10, but when you make a targeted one, you'll probably use 4 or 5. It's going to depend. It depends is the answer to every question, because it depends on you. You may decide to make something even more functional, but you're really only going to send it to the headhunter or the recruiter because they know how to read and rewrite it for their client. But starting with the master is for everything. Hands? Yes?
So how do the more experienced and skilled workers create a resume that does not reflect their age or the antiquity?
So ageism is there, and but to strengthen your feeling about the things that you've accomplished, you really want to go back in your resume. I mean, I found out that somebody at age 8, and this is the first line in her LinkedIn, I was waiting tables at church after bingo. The food was so good, demand grew to maximize my take, I hustled. That was certainly more than 25 years in her history. So write it all out in the master. Don't go back more than 10 or 15 years on what you present. Put something like earlier roles included. or for, see LinkedIn for earlier roles such as job title, job title, job title. Don't put dates on your education. And then just do a better job of job search. Recently, I saw a post for a job under somebody I know fairly well. And I contacted him and I said, he already applied. I told him not to wait, but here's his resume. Can you at least get him a screening interview? And he said, certainly looks like he has the skills we're looking for. Got the screening interview. Unfortunately, he made it to the final round and didn't, and he, might be ageism for that. But the point being that his online application might never have been seen if I hadn't alerted somebody to that. So if you don't know anybody at a company, you go to LinkedIn. Well, first you go to LinkedIn anyway. You see who you know at a company, and maybe it's only second connections. Who do you have in common? Who will do the best introduction? So that client I mentioned was interested in a company. I said, oh, I have somebody that works there. I contacted him. He eventually got back to me to say that he's not there anymore, but if she tells him what she's looking for, I may be able to help her in terms of how to go about getting an interview. And I said, make sure you tell him that if he knows of any other jobs, it's not just where that person works. They may have a spouse that works at a company that just got a big contract. I hope that answered your question.
Yes.
Okay.
From the online community, how do you list a position title if it does not match the tasks you were doing?
So I just did this for somebody, and then when she showed it to the HR person and the recruiter, who, by the way, didn't say get rid of all of that redundancy, I had written, and other people have left it this way. You put the job title, and then you write in parentheses formal title, and then the next line you write that, and in parentheses de facto title. You do that on LinkedIn as well. You put the formal title because the person calling to check that you were employed there is only going to want to have it be matchy. And but in the first line of LinkedIn, you can say, while the title is my actual title, really what I do is more of blah, blah, blah. And then you describe blah, blah, blah. Yes.
What's your strategy for getting those numbers, stats, percentages from companies that you might not have had the best break with?
Well, Google helps. Look up the name of the company, the words annual report, and the last year that you worked, last full year you worked there. And hopefully, if it's a public company, that will come up, and you have to go to the annual report and search on a $, and it should say what the revenue is. For banks and financial companies, it's often called assets under management. Maybe you contact people who still work there, who still like you. Let's face it, job search sucks. So an important thing to do is make a list of people who are already in your fan club. They really like you. They're the most likely to actually help you versus just saying. Now, you don't ask them for help finding a job. You ask them for career guidance, because one is very easy for them to say yes to. And, it could be guidance, advice, whatever. And then that first conversation you have with them needs to be about how they're doing. Don't immediately go, hey, here's how you can help me. You want to establish a beachhead. Look it up if you don't know what I mean. You want to establish a place on the beach where you can continue to fight. And like, there are companies where if you're referred by an employee, you're guaranteed a screening interview. Hello. Now maybe the score on your applicant tracking system doesn't matter. I mean, you still have to pay homage to the keywords. Nobody's asked me about keywords. I do not write resumes for machines to read, but at the end, when we're done, I have the client, and you want somebody else to do this for you. Actually, this is the only thing I use AI for, which is make a list of keywords in the following job description. Voila. Now I have the client say the words, project management. I search in the resume to see if it's there. If it's there, we move on. If it's not there, we together figure out where the best place is to insert that. And sometimes it's in some piddly job on your second page, but you got it in there. And then we just go through that. And when I do somebody's LinkedIn, I draft it in a Google Doc. And so once we're mostly done, we do the same thing for that. Okay, sorry. That's keywords. That's paying homage to the keyword gods. And you can pay better homage in LinkedIn, which is a search engine. So you repeat yourself. What they let you now choose 5 skills, but I also have something that says role required strengths in, and some people call it keyword stuffing. I call it keyword soup, because while in your about section, you want it to be a vertical list. Now it could just be a paragraph, because they're not going to read it, but it's going to serve you for when some recruiter goes and searches on a skill set and you pop up.
How do you feel about including social media handles if you have a social media unrelated to the job that you do?
So if it's related to the job you want to also make sure your privacy settings are as good as they can be. Don't let friends of friends be able to see your posts. Even if you're over 21, you shouldn't have any pictures of you holding alcohol. Yes, put them there, but I did one for somebody who did a lot of social media for her clients, and we actually said, see LinkedIn, because it didn't really matter. They want them to give them a reason to leave. They accidentally hit it, and it takes them to that page. They may never come back to your resume, which brings up another point. Everything on your resume I refer to as an item. So whether it's an item in your opening line in the summary, something you put in the table, career highlights, I never have 2 lines. I never have 2 sentences. If I need to, I put a semicolon and I carry on. And here's why. You know the people who talk so much that they never put a period at the end of a sentence. It just ends with, and, but, and you're like, when can I jump in? Well, conversely, when somebody is reading your resume, I think giving them a period gives them permission to move on from that bullet. But if you just put a semicolon in the word and, you might still keep them there. It's just a theory. Any other questions? Because we're about to wrap up. I'll still be here one more. Can we take one more? Okay.
Jumping to cover letters, I'm coming from like nonprofit government side, the advantage of a generic cover letter to one custom to that position. Like, what do you recommend?
Well, I don't know anything about the federal side and maybe the government, whatever. I don't know those resumes, and there are people who specialize in those. So I would just say generic doesn't work. You want to show them that you've looked into what that organization does and can speak to it. And just like the summary is the last section you work on, the opening paragraph, the opening line in your cover letter is the most important, because they might not go past it. So I try to write something unique. Try not to use this one, but one was, are all cover letters as hard to read as they are to write? Just like everything else in my life, I'll do the best that I can. But I didn't write that until the rest of the cover letter was written, and I was like, what am I gonna write? What am I gonna write? So you want to come up with something special to you. Go to the website, get the free downloaded PDF.